In case you've forgotten, last season ended with the disastrous Beast showdown, where our lovely heroes found out that they don't know how to deal with the Beast. Julia was the only one capable of harming the Beast, but she ended up making a deal with him in order to take out Reynard. Episode 1, Knight of Crowns. Quentin is now running around the woods like a chicken with his head cut off, because apparently he's lost his friends. He ends up giving the witch from Hansel and Gretel a vial of his blood to help find them, but just as he hands his blood over, his friends appear. Mostly intact, besides Penny's hands, due to the fact that Alice is still juiced up on God essence. They try to pull a Beast and juice the wellsprings, but there isn't very much left, and it's quite literally the only thing that keeps Fillory running. So that's a no-go. Quentin uses his book knowledge to begin Plan C. Get into the castle armory and get the battle magic that Rupert Chatwin used to win the Battle of the Bulge. The only people that can go into the castle armory, though, are royals. And since Elliot is only High King in name, he needs to go get crowned. The five split up. Margot and Penny go to track down a magical healing river to, fix his hands. And Elliot, Quentin, and Alice go find the Rainbow Bridge, since that is the path towards the crowning area. Julia and Martin arrive back on Earth through a kid's ball pit. Very into the pit, if you will. And over recycled pizza, the two enter into a word is bond contract. It's a spell that guarantees that Martin won't hurt anybody while they are working towards getting rid of Reynard. And when Reynard is dealt with, Julia agrees to release the Leo Blade. The unlikely duo starts searching for signs of Reynard and finds a string of hedge witches all with their hearts ripped out with the same MO. They were all trying to summon the Lady Underground. At the healing river, Penny's hands are Frankenstein back on and all seems well until the caretaker asks for a tip. Penny scoffs at him saying, "Hey, I know your type. I'm not going to pay for this. It's a public resource." Since they don't have any gold, they end up leaving him empty-handed, at which point he whispers under his breath that you're gonna regret this, at the same time that Penny's hands start glowing yellow. The gang meets up at the Rainbow Bridge and they all cross it and make it to the crowning area where they find an ancient knight there with a quiz to make sure that Elliot is qualified to be king. All the questions have to do with pop culture in the 90s on Earth, so Elliot is able to prove his worth by quoting a little Dirty Dancing. Elliot gets the crowns. Yes, crowns. There are 4 kings and queens of Fillory. Quentin turns it into a little impromptu ceremony, being like, "Hey, after all we've been through, we might as well make something of this." And he crowns Elliot, High King Elliot, the Spectacular. Elliot then crowns Margot, High Queen Margot, the Destroyer, and Alice, Queen Alice, the Wise. Margot then crowns Quentin, King Quentin, the moderately socially maladjusted. Newly crowned, the gang makes it to Whitespire and find out that being kings and queens of a magical land is not all fun and games. There has been a lot of suffering under the Beast rule. They are, though, able to get inside the armory and find out that the book they've been looking for is not in the armory in Fillory, but in fact, it's back on Earth at Brakebills. So now they have to go back to Brakebills, leaving Elliot behind because now he can no longer leave Fillory. Some other things that are notable in this episode are the fact that Martin is trying to convince Julia to get rid of her shade, which is basically just her emotions. Penny, after not tipping the caretaker, is dealing with uncooperative hands, and Alice dealt with some insecurity over the fact that when the Beast showed up, she froze. And Quentin encourages her to try out her god-fueled powers, and she is able to turn an apple seed into a full-blown mature tree. And of course, this little bonding moment leads to a little kiss, but that does not mean that they are back together. And also, Fen is a new woman, and by that, she has been recasted. Episode 2, Hotel Spa Problems. Penny, Alice, Quentin, and Margot arrive in Brakebills looking for the missing battle magic. Julia realizes that the Beast is a theater kid, and also that he might have cursed the castle. Elliot deals with the reality of being king and has to face his farming roots, as the Florian farmers have only ever relied on magic to farm, and with magic being at an all-time low, they don't know what to do. So it has left him to bring the magic of fertilizer to the farmers. He also struggles with being married to a woman and the fact that he's going to have to be committed to her and only her for the rest of his life. And he tries to compensate for this by bringing in other couples into their bedroom to bring some spice in, but Fen is uncomfortable and he realizes that he may be overstepping himself as king by asking the people to do this, and ends up sending everybody away. The Beast ends up kidnapping Marina to use as bait for Reynard, but Julia is unwilling to let that happen and ends up letting her free. Marina sees the writing on the walls with all this Reynard stuff and tries to seek asylum at Brakebills, but Dean Fogg turns her away, saying, "There's a reason that you got kicked out of Brakebills in the first place, and also, this isn't an asylum." The hunt for battle magic at Brakebills leads them to a Pixies puzzle. Professor Bigsby, who is a pixie, told Dean Fogg years ago that one day they would need battle magic, and left him a clue saying, "The battle magic will be where knowledge always is. The day you need it, I promise it will be your last hope." Well, the library is where knowledge is, and Last Hope Options is the battle magic book that they're looking for. There's an entire montage of them trying to crack the code and figure out what the meaning is, and Alice and Quentin end up doing a bunch of anagrams, and one of them happens to be Hotel Spa Potions, which just so happens to be one of the books in the library. And upon taking it off the shelves, they realize that's just a cover for the book Last Hope Options that they've been looking for the whole time. Unfortunately, when they open the book, the pages they need have been torn out, and Professor Bigby has left another riddle saying where they'll be able to find her. They end up solving that riddle pretty quick, and Dean Fogg, Alice, and Quentin make their way to Professor Bigby's place, where she seems rather unconcerned by the fact that they really need this battle magic. And instead of helping them, she starts talking about her past relationship with Dean Fogg. Dean Fogg tries to redirect her, and she eventually relents and says Alice is the only one that's going to be able to pull off this spell, given that she still has some of that god juice in her system. Quentin goes to Julia to warn her that, hey, when we show up, don't be within 20 feet of the Beast. Which leads to them having an argument where Julia is like, you can't do anything to the Beast until I've dealt with Reynard. And Quentin is like, I'm sorry, but we can't wait for you to do that. I didn't need to warn you about this. I'm just giving you a heads up what we're doing. That sort of brings her down a little bit, and she passes off the information that, hey, the Beast might have cursed the castle somehow. Penny ends up getting help from the Brakebills librarian, who does a little sexually charged ritual with him that leads him with bracelets that help him gain control over his hands again. The last thing they do before they are ready to face the Beast again is have a girls' night. And by girls' night, I mean Dean Fogg gets them all drunk before tattooing a Keiko demon inside him as a measure of holding off the Beast before they're able to take him out. The episode ends with Elliot starting to see some fruits of his fertilizer labor, and the gang arrives back in Fillory. Meanwhile, Marina voluntarily goes back to Julia and Martin saying, I have no other options, let's do this, I'll be the bait. Episode 3, Divine Elimination. Penny, Alice, Quentin, and Margot arrive back in Fillory and see all that Elliot has done with the throne room while they've been gone. They all take a seat, and immediately the Beast's curse activates. A battle royale for the throne ensues. As the only one without a crown, Penny is left unaffected by the sudden onset of manic behavior that everyone suddenly exhibits. He finds out that curses unfortunately can't be broken, but if you let them run their course, they will end. Good news, Penny knows how to fix this. Bad news, he has to kill everybody. Okay, let me explain. He doesn't have to kill them forever, he just has to have them be temporarily medically dead in order for the curse to end, before he is able to revive them. So, using modern medicine, Penny is able to kill everybody and then bring them back with the curse now broken. Disaster averted. This whole curse issue wouldn't have been that big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that 3 of the 4 Keiko demons ended up being used in the ensuing chaos. And so now they only have Quentin's Keiko demon in order to hold off the beast. Back on Earth, Marina, now on board for the plan of being bait for Reynard, is being coached into being a believable petitioner for the Lady Underground, and starts the summoning ritual, but before she finishes, Martin teleports himself and Julia away, saying, "We can't be there when Reynard comes because if he knows we're there, he won't come." Even with this explanation, Julia is still a little peeved and ends up going back to her apartment to find that Marina never finished the summoning and just left. Marina makes her way back to her apartment where she locks up her wards, only to find out that Reynard is already inside them. Reynard then starts his little trickster god, I enjoy suffering thing when Martin and Julia show up, where Martin freezes him, but Julia freezes, unable to immediately take action. Which wouldn't be that big of a deal if it wasn't for the fact that Alice's god juices are running out and it's a go time for their plan. Penny travels to Earth grabbing Martin, and Julia grabs onto them while they teleport back to Fillory where the gang is in formation. Upon seeing Julia, Quentin breaks formation and runs to push her out of the way, which distracts Alice and she's unable to get a clear shot. Instead of ending him, she just heavily injures him, leaving the beast in bad condition, but still alive and able to run off. Penny travels Julia back to New York and says thanks a lot for ruining our plan, and in retaliation for ruining her plan, she rips his bracelets off. The others in Fillory split up, having Alice and Quentin go to the wellspring after the beast, and Margot and Elliot going to petition Ember for more god juice. But Ember isn't home. Instead, he just took a dump in the wellspring in order to thwart Martin. On the ride to the wellspring, Quentin is like, Alice, I still love you, I want to win you back, and sort of just emotionally dumps on her, and Alice is like, the only thing that I'm emotionally able to process is that the fact that after this is all done, maybe I'd like a sundae. Can't deal with your emotional dumpster fire. But once again, it wouldn't be the Magicians without a little smooching action, because Alice likes them emotionally hung up. When they finally make it to the wellspring, Alice sees the beast and goes to attack him, but her god juices have run out. But Alice is like, you're not getting away from me this time, and continues doing the spell, which causes her to niffen out and disappear. Martin starts laughing, but all of a sudden, Niffen Alice appears and says, this was my plan the entire time, and she ends up ripping Martin a new one, releasing the moss from inside his body, and ending the beast's reign of terror. Quentin, having watched all of this, is like, oh gosh, I can't let Niffen Alice run wild, and he releases his Keiko demon, which takes out Alice. Back in New York, Julia makes it to Marina's apartment for the second time, and finds Marina dead. Episode 4, Flying Forest. Ding dong! The beast is dead! We got 99 problems, but the beast ain't one. In the aftermath, Penny is gone, Alice is dead, Quentin is getting multiple surgeries from a centaur, and Margot and Elliot have a land to rule. After Ember's little divine emission in the wellspring, magic is even iffier in Fillory. The wellspring isn't like a swimming pool. You can't just shut it down and blast it with chemicals. The children of Earth tend not to be very beneficial to Fillory, so after the beast's demise, there is a power vacuum in Fillory, and no one really respects Elliot as king. So Elliot's just sort of stuck in this land that he never wanted to rule in the first place. Our neighborhood, Fillory Clinton, though, has an idea. A loophole, if you may. Just because his body has to stay in Fillory, who says his mind does? And thus, Return of the Margolem, version 2, the Elgolem. Quentin wakes up a real boy and realizes that the world still sucks. Penny shows up to the Centaurs trying to get some help with his hands, but after the Centaurs learn why he's having problems with his hands, they go, "Oh, it's because the caretaker cursed you? We're not messing with that." Quentin happens to see the White Lady, a being that upon capture grants 3 wishes. And after an uneasy truce, Penny and Quentin come together to go on a journey to find the White Lady to bring Alice back and get Penny's hands working again. Back on Earth, Julia tracks down Katie in order to get some assistance with dealing with Reynard. Marina left a message on her body, which turns out to be a locator number for a book at Brakebills. Since Katie was expelled, she can't go back, but with a mirror spell, she can help guide Julia through the library. The book that Julia ends up finding is a book on necromancy, but since the book can't leave campus, Julia has to copy it down in order to take it out. El Golem is a resounding success, so now Margot and Elliot come back to Brakebills to find out that in their absence, Todd has taken over as the king of the physical kids' house in a suspiciously familiar vest. And Elliot, who is finally free of Fillory, goes to test out the boundaries of El Golem, seeing if he is able to hook up with somebody here. It seems like the rules of Fillory don't apply to El Golem, but just before he starts, Fen wakes him up in Fillory, and he ends up having this interdimensional threesome with both the man on Earth and Fen in Fillory. Penny and Quentin's quest leads them through the Flying Forest, which in the books was described as a forest that has trees that fly. But we very quickly find out that that's not actually what's going on here. Instead of trees flying, they're releasing a substance into the air that leaves both Penny and Quentin high as shit. This leads them to spending God knows how long circling the same rock. Elliot's new reality is sort of starting to get to him. He went into Fillory to escape the life that he was living and is now stuck living 2 new lives. It's very comedic and tragic how this is a man that didn't even really want to live 1 life who is now forced into participating actively in 2. Since Julia is at Brakebills copying down the necromancy book, Margot ends up seeing her and gives her a verbal lashing, being like "You got Alice killed, you're screwing up so much, I want you to know I do not like you." But at the end of it, it seems like that Margot got something out of her system, and she ends up giving Julia a spell that'll help her copy down the book faster. With the book now copied, Julia goes back to Marina's apartment, and her and Katie are able to use the necromancy spell to revive Marina. The spell only lasts a few minutes, but it is long enough for Marina to tell them about the fact that 40 years ago, a girl was able to trap Reynard until Julia released him, and now Julia is the only hope for trapping Reynard once again. As Penny and Quentin are walking around the same rock in the Flying Forest, Quentin eventually sees Alice's necklace on the ground, and this is enough to help temporarily break the high, and he is able to get himself and Penny outside of the forest, where they both come down from the high. Quentin crashes out and just starts getting hit with all of the emotions that he's been dealing with all at once. Penny is able to talk him down and be like, "Hey, you still want to help Alice? We can keep doing this. You can do this. I believe in us." And they are able to continue on their journey, where Quentin is finally able to catch the White Lady, where she tells them that she can fix Penny's hands, but she can't bring Alice back. And she asks Quentin if there's anything else he would like, and he says, "No, magic's given me everything I've ever wanted, and the only thing I want now I can't get. Just send me back." And he gets sent back to Earth. Episode 5, Cheat Day. Penny can't catch a break. His hands still aren't working. He ends up going to Mayakovsky for help, but Mayakovsky is only willing to help him if Penny does a series of tasks for him. On the other hand, Quentin has abandoned magic and is now living a normie life. He got set up with a job at the same company that Emily Greenstreet works at, the girl who was involved with the professor that led to Alice's brother Charlie becoming a Niffin. As much as he wants to leave magic behind, he still has the reflexes. When he isn't able to easily open a jar, he goes instinctively to magic it open, and by doing so, he catches the attention of Emily Greenfield, where the two of them end up bonding over being magicians, but ultimately leaving it behind. Even though the mundane world doesn't have the dangers that the magical one does, it still has its own flaws. Life is so dull that everybody self-medicates. And when you're a former magician, when you get drunk, that can sort of lead to a magical cheat day. In Fillory, Elliot is trying to make champagne, and Fen comes up to him and says, "Surprise, we're pregnant," just as an assassin tries to take out Elliot. The Fillorian United Fighters, or the Foo Fighters for short, will not rest until a Fillorian sits on the throne. But instead of petitioning Ember to change the rules, they've decided that they're just gonna take out every child of Earth. This sort of puts Margot and Elliot in a tough situation because they can't just execute this would-be assassin because then he would become a martyr. But how else are they gonna give the council a satisfying result? Penny and Mayakovsky end up getting drunk together, where Mayakovsky tells him that he should stop trying to get magic back because with the way magic has been fluctuating, there might not even be magic in a few years. He should get out while he can, unlike him. And the reason it's too late for Mayakovsky is because he made the mistake of getting involved with the wrong student, and he had to choose between abandoning magic or coming to break Bill's South. And since magic's been fluctuating so much these days, he's been working on building a magical battery for a rainy day. Magical Cheat Day entails of Emily and Quentin using illusion magic to turn each other into the person they miss the most. So of course, Emily turns into Alice, and Quentin, if you didn't have a hunch already about this, turns into Mayakovsky. Because Emily is the student that got involved with Mayakovsky. In Fillory, Elliot ultimately decides not to execute the Foo Fighter, as Fen is pregnant and that's not the precedent he wants to set. But the one thing he doesn't know is that Fen herself is a former Foo Fighter, and now she's being blackmailed by the Foo Fighters. During the process of Julia and Katie trying to track down the woman from 40 years ago, Julia realizes that she's pregnant. As this is obviously highly upsetting, Katie instantly offers to help Julia get an abortion, and they are able to quickly get her into a clinic to get the procedure done. But when she gets to the clinic, weird things start happening. First, the receptionist deletes her appointment, but luckily the doctor is like, "Oh, Julia, I know you had an appointment, come right on in." And as the doctor gears up to perform the procedure, her hands start shaking, and then all of a sudden she stabs herself in the eye with the instrument. It seems like this fetus has some godly protections. After Magical Cheat Day, Quentin wakes up sober and is like, "I can't use magic like this isn't healthy," and he leaves. He goes to send Alice's parents an email explaining what happened to Alice. Just before he sends it, he sees Alice across the street. It seems like Quentin is getting haunted by Alice. Episode 6, The Cock Barons. Once Quentin realizes that Alice might not be fully dead, he tries to call her Niffin, but she doesn't respond. Alice had been working on a reversal spell, so if Quentin can find her Niffin, maybe he can bring her back. He ends up going to the memorial service that her parents are hosting, and while there, gets led by a figure of Alice towards her dad's locked office, where he ends up being found. Alice had asked her dad previously how to deal with hauntings after encountering the kids at the Plover House. And he has a spell that might be able to lure Alice's Niffin. This spell requires a blood relative to be honest and call forth the spirit. Alice's dad is all but set to do so until he ends up breaking his leg. Julia and Katie find a clue about the girl from 20 years ago in Hoboken, New Jersey, where a singular building has been left unscathed by a fire that raged through the area. When they get there, they find a sigil on the ground, and Julia scrapes up some of the old blood to use on a locator spell. Penny arrives in Fillory looking for some special moss for Mayakovsky, and ends up recruiting the map maker to find the location of it. Prince S of Loria comes to Fillory about the matter of getting the wellspring fixed, and proposes that him and Margot get married, and through that alliance split the wellspring 50-50 between Fillory and Loria. Margot doesn't even want to hear him out. Margot gives a resounding hell no. And in retaliation, the Lorians teleport the castle to Loria, which is all just like a gray, rocky, dreary landscape due to the fact that the wellspring is barely reaching Loria anymore. And it looks strangely phallic. Julia and Katie split up. Katie is tracking down her mom's old contacts in order to find someone to help out with Julia's situation, and Julia tracks down the girl from 40 years ago. The girl, now a woman named Dana, tells Julia that she also got pregnant and she had the baby. She can't banish Reynard anymore, but Julia can. Dana ends up luring Julia to her basement, where she then knocks her out. Since Alice's dad, Daniel, is no longer able to perform the spell, Alice's mom, Stephanie, says, "Oh fine, I'll do it." But in order for the spell to work, she needs to be honest, and let's be honest, Stephanie is a narcissist, and when she goes to do the spell, it goes badly, and by the time that she's able to bring forth some real emotions, she ends up leaving the spell saying, "I can't deal with this." And Quentin is back at square one. Margot goes to Prince S to try to fix this whole issue. After talking with Elliot, she's more willing to enter into an arranged marriage for the betterment of Fillory. But Prince S is like, "I don't even want to get married to you. You're a virgin." And Margot is like, "You don't know how wrong you are. If you think the Lorians are good in bed, you haven't met me." And let's just say Margot makes him beg and proves why she is Queen Margot. Since the castle is gone and Penny can't find him, he ends up entering into one of Margot's dreams, where she passes on that they are in Loria. Penny travels to Loria, but he can't find the castle. And that's when it hits him. What if they never left? What if they're still here? The Lorians didn't teleport the castle. They just made it look like they did. Julia wakes up in Dana's basement to a weird creature that Dana says is a Haxenpaxen, a creature that emits such a strong magical odor that it shields them even from gods. This is how she's been keeping herself safe. Dana tells Julia that she needs to have this baby. Only when she's giving birth will she have the power to banish Reynard. Katie, who has been off tracking down her mother's old connections, realizes she hasn't heard from Julia in a while. She tries to contact Julia, and when Julia doesn't respond, she heads after her. Katie is able to track Julia to Dana's house and is able to get inside and rescue her. As the two go to leave Dana's house, they also take the Haxenpaxen with them. After what seems like a day of failures, Niffin Alice finally decides to show up. And she says, "Oh, the reason I didn't come earlier is because I didn't want to." And Niffin Alice isn't dead. The Keiko demon wasn't able to take her out. Instead, it trapped her inside Quentin's body. Without the Haxenpaxen around, Reynard is able to find Dana. R.I.P. Dana. After finding out that they aren't in Loria, Margot is livid and declares war on Loria. Episode 7, Plan B. Now that Quentin is aware of his little passenger, Niffin Alice is making it her entire goal to torment Quentin every single waking moment. Julia and Katie go to Katie's mom's connection, which happens to be at a Korean butcher's, where a Mudang is able to exorcise Julia's little trickster. But it comes at a high cost of 1 million in gold. They obviously don't have that, and they're gonna need to rob a bank. While they're staking out a bank, Julia and Katie end up getting attacked by some invisible creature, but luckily, the Haxan Paxton is still around and saves their lives, but at the cost of its own. They end up going to Brakebills for help and find out that Julia's problem is getting very complicated in the fact that the fetus has entwined itself with her spirit. The only thing now that can deal with it is a Mudang, the same one that's charging $1 million in gold. Julia ends up staying at the physical kid's cottage in order to stay protected behind the wards, and she goes to Quentin saying, "Hey, can you help us rob this bank?" And Alice is like, "You better do this. I won't stop tormenting you if you don't do this," because she wants to rob a bank. In Fillory, Margot finds out it was a very bad idea to declare war because they're flat out broke. Her and Elliot end up coming to Brakebills in order to try to figure out their money situation. Penny ends up running into Katie at Brakebills as he's on his little Mayakovsky item quest. And now the gang's back together, but this time they're gonna rob a bank. As the only one with prior bank robbing experience, Margot gives everybody the lowdown. All banks have both regular and magical security measures. It takes 2 managers to get into a vault. After they scan their fingers simultaneously, the wards go down and they have 10 minutes to enter in the combination code to the vault. Magicians robbing a bank triggers battle magicians who will shoot first and ask questions never. And the entire vault is an anti-traveler sigil, but it only goes off if you touch the ground, so all you have to do is just not touch the ground, hence a gravity belt. As one of the Mudangs is the reason that goblins are being sent after Julia to guarantee that the fetus doesn't get born, Julia can't actively participate in the bank robbery. She has to stay behind Brakebills' wards and ends up working on one of Richard's old spells, the Quarterback, which gives the user the ability to turn back time 15 seconds. Ocean's 11 time. Katie and Quentin work to get the fingerprints from the 2 managers. After that, they release bees into the bank in order to get everybody to evacuate. And when the bank calls in exterminators, they show up and are able to get in posing as exterminators. But there was one slight miscalculation in the fact that 2 of the security guards, before the bees went off, sort of went into a closet for some little private time. So after they come in and scan their fingers to get the wards to come down so Penny can get into the vault, the security guards come out and are like, this is strange, something's going on. But before the guards are able to call for backup, Elliot luckily has a magic disco ball, which forces them into an impromptu dance battle that leads them out of the building. Back on track, Penny is now inside the vault and loading up the bag with gold. The only thing is, gold is really heavy, and so it keeps weighing him down and getting him closer and closer to touching the floor, and he keeps having to readjust the gravity belt, pushing him up so that he doesn't touch the floor accidentally. But he accidentally touches the floor, and now he's trapped inside the vault. At the end of 10 minutes, a battle magician is going to show up, and it's going to be game over. Between Elliot, Katie, and Quentin, none of them know how to break the vault door open, especially given that they're on a time crunch. But luckily for them, Quentin's little secret, Alice, does know how to break down the vault, in exchange for 30 minutes with Quentin's body. Quentin hastily agrees because they're on a time crunch and there isn't really anything else they can do, and Alice writes down the spell that then Quentin performs and opens the bank vault, just at the moment that the 10 minutes are up and the battle magician shows up. Julia, safely behind Brakebills' wards, has been watching this go down and realizes that she's going to have to show up with her impromptu time machine. She shows up outside the bank with Margot and says, "Hey guys, you got 4 rewinds to get out of this alive. You better make it count." The first 3 attempts to get away from the battle magician end poorly. Finally, on the last attempt, they are able to make it mostly unscathed, with only Elliot taking a hit, but luckily he's an El Golem, so that doesn't take him out. It just means that back in Fillory, his body starts seizing. Since Julia is outside the wards again, the goblins show up and attack her, but luckily they now have the 1,000,000 gold to pay the Mudang, and they are able to get the exorcism done. There was just one minor complication. Episode 8. Words as bond. Good news. Julia is now demigod free. Bad news. Julia's shade is also gone. The main reason magicians haven't been able to do god-killing spells is because they need a bigger fuel source, such as Dana's demigod son. Back in Fillory, Elliot's mind is stuck in the clay, and he's gonna need a bridge in order to get back into his body. The only thing is, with the magic brownouts, every time the magic goes out, the spell has to start over. Margot ends up telling Quentin that he should just go back to Earth to be there for Julia. But the thing is, without her shade, Julia's actually doing pretty well. She's not in need of any comforting. Actually, she's already on the hunt for Dana's son and ends up leaving the wards, where immediately Reynard pops out and corners her. But luckily for her, Quentin's been shadowing her and he pops out and buttons both him and Julia back to Fillory. Or he tells her, Julia, you're getting put in timeout. I can't trust you to keep yourself safe right now. Quentin then goes back to Brakebills, but it's time for Alice to have the body, and she takes over. In Fillory, the Lorien troops are amassing outside of the One-Way Forest. And since the trees, the talking trees, are not very big fans of Fillory, Julia says, hey, maybe we should go negotiate with them. That's what they did in the books. So Julia and Margot go to the Dryad ambassador for the talking trees, where he immediately goes, oh, why did 2 women show up? Why didn't the king come? So it doesn't really look like negotiating is going to work here. Back on Earth, Alice's time with Quentin's body is up, and she's complaining that she didn't have enough time, and Quentin's trying to figure out what she did while she was in control, and finds out that she's been looking into a bunch of Niffin stuff. Penny ends up going to the library in the Netherlands to look for a book for Mayakovsky, where the librarian comes up to him and says, hey, you know, the Order of the Library of the Netherlands is full of master magicians. We could help you with your hand problem. In exchange for becoming bound in service for the short time of 1,000,000 years, even after death. Penny ends up declining the offer and makes his way back to Brakebills, where he instead offers his services to Katie, saying, hey, I know all the stuff that's happened between us, but you know what? I can keep it professional. So now Penny, Katie, and Quentin are trying to track down Dana's son, but are having no luck. Alice, in Quentin's head, pipes up saying, I might remember a way to find Dana's son if I get 30 more minutes in the body. Quentin, still trying to hide the fact that Alice is a passenger in his body, makes up this weird story where he agrees to Alice's demands for more time, but saying, I'll only give you 20 minutes. And then Alice tells him, it's phosphomancy, you dummy, my specialty. You can use that to use time sight to look into the past. Since Quentin's being weirder than usual, Penny's sort of picking up on this, and also just the fact that for once in his life, Quentin has strengthened his mind wards and isn't really bleeding his thoughts, so this is sort of just something that Penny notes down about how Quentin is acting. The 3 of them end up making their way to the hospital where Dana gave birth to her son, and they are able to see the baby being handed off to a man, but unfortunately the man is magically blacked out, so they're unable to find out what happened. It seems Dana really put some work into protecting the secrecy of her child. Back in Fillory, Julia finds the Lorien illusionist and bargains with him for an invisibility spell that hides her from even gods. She also goes to deliver a peace offering to the Dryad ambassador, which ends up being a fireball. Now Margot is PO'd with Julia for, burning an endangered tree species and ends up locking her in the dungeon. With her extra time, Alice is tracking down and terrorizing creatures in her pursuit of knowledge on Niffins, leaving Quentin feeling really sad, being like, man, I can't even help the one person who deserves it the most. Katie ends up trying to push Penny away, saying, stop, I can't deal with you, I'm too broken for you. The next time Quentin awakens from another Alice control, he finds himself in the backseat of a taxi in Dublin, and Alice is acting really suspicious about what she did, so he ends up going back to see what she did, which is actually her using reverse psychology to make him go there. Because she set up a little altar to gather the attention of Friar Joseph, one of the only Niffins to have ever been known to be able to break out of a Niffin box. She tries to get him to free her from Quentin, but he laughs at her, saying, only after you free yourself are you worthy of spending any time with me. He also warns her that Quentin's body wasn't made to contain a Niffin, and if this whole situation doesn't get figured out, they're both gonna die. Penny ends up signing the contract with the library in order to get the name of Dana's son. He tells Katie it's up to him to decide what he wants to do with his time, and if Katie is something he wants to spend his time on, then he's gonna damn well do it, because he still loves her. Quentin makes his way back to Brakebills looking very beat up, and Katie ends up knocking him out so that Penny can incept him, at which point they find out that Niffin Alice has been inside Quentin the whole time. Episode 9, Lesser Evils. Now that Quentin's little Alice problem has come to light, they lock him up in Brakebills. One way or another, they're gonna get Alice out of his body, even if that means they box her. Penny yoinks the button from Quentin and takes Katie back to Fillory in order to tell Julia what they found out. They end up breaking Julia out of the dungeon and bringing her back to Earth. One of the council members, Abigail, a talking sloth, suggests that in light of the Fillorians abandoning the army due to Julia's arsonistic ways, suggests that Elliot should do one-on-one combat, a duel between monarchs. No king has ever volunteered for that, and that's an assured way to win over the people. So Elliot signs himself up for a good old-fashioned Royal Rumble. Reynard's son is Senator John Gaines. Penny, Katie, and Julia go to convince him that magic is real and that he's being hunted by a trickster god, who also happens to be his dad. Julia, who has been acting unhinged ever since her shade got ripped away, attempts to kill him and contain his godly powers in a magical battery. And understandably, he starts freaking out and he accidentally lashes out with his untrained magic before they end up knocking him out and kidnapping him to Brakebills. Elliot is practicing for the duel and is finding out that just because he can do magic doesn't mean he's going to be good with a sword. And to make things worse, his opponent, King Idri, is a proficient swordsman. He's already fought in and won 14 duels. Fen ends up bringing him a magical sword that her grandfather made for a previous king. It comes with an accompanying spell that instantaneously makes the user a master swordsman. The only problem with the magical sword plan is the fact that magic is continuing to brown out, and if magic goes in the middle of the duel, Elliot is hosed. Margot gets told that she could petition the fairies in order to fix the wellspring. The only thing is, they require a very steep price. Elliot is starting to get really nervous about the upcoming duel, and Margot, in ultimate theater kid fashion, casts a spell that has everybody breaking out into Les Mis. It lasts up until the second the duel starts, at which point Elliot activates the magical sword, and everything seems to be going good until King Idri runs off into the woods. Unfortunately, the duel doesn't end until one of the monarchs is dead. While the duel is still happening, the ambassador to the fairies arrives at Whitespire, meaning that Margot is going to have to go back in order to negotiate with him. When she gets there, she finds out that the fairies are only willing to fix the wellspring in exchange for Elliot and Fenn's kid. And she's like, over my dead body, which was a bad thing to say because that offends the ambassador, which means that she's no longer going to be able to negotiate the bargain, meaning it's either the kid or no magic. Back at Brakebills, Katie is trying to convince John of his parentage, saying, hey, don't you think it's odd that whenever you sponsored a bill, it would always go through? Reynard shows up and tries to communicate with John, but the wards keep him out until magic browns out again and the wards go down. And everybody has to run to the lab where there's an emergency generator. In the woods, without magic, Elliot is up a tree, literally. Him and Idri end up having a heart-to-heart about the struggles they face due to being rulers. Margot finds Fenn and says, hey, are you willing to do anything in order to get magic back? And Fenn says, yes, I am. And Margot goes, okay, but doesn't tell her what the cost will be. Julia ends up taking Quentin outside of the lab's wards in order to try to get Alice to attack Reynard. It doesn't work, and it just puts Quentin in danger until John shows up, where Reynard changes his plan of action and starts beckoning John, saying, come here if you want to find out about yourself. And then Reynard and John leave. Margot ends up agreeing to the fairies' deal, and the fairies come in and fix the wellsprings just in time for Elliot to avoid death. But during his and Idri's heart-to-heart, they've come to the conclusion that neither of them want to die, and instead of ending the duel that way, they decide they're gonna get married. Because apparently in Fillory, every ruler is allowed to have both a wife and a husband. So the war ends up stopping before it started, with an alliance between the two nations where Loria will receive 50% of the wellspring. Due to Julia showing no remorse for her actions and putting others and herself in danger, she ends up getting put in the timeout corner in Brakebills. She's acting a little too beast-like without her shade. During this episode, Quentin and Alice have been arguing their points, with Quentin saying, I don't want to live in a world without you, and Alice saying, hey, not every Niffin goes on a murdering spree, you can trust me. So before his body gives out, Quentin ends up releasing Alice free. In Fillory, the fairies start appearing around the castle, but only Margot can see them. Episode 10, The Girl Who Told Time. Dean Fogg lets Julia free. Brakebills isn't a jail, and she isn't a student. Throughout all of this, he's been strangely accommodating to her. And it's because he's known her 39 times. Except for the 40th time loop, this one, Julia attended Brakebills. If Julia went to Brakebills, we would have found out that she's a knowledge magician just like Dean Fogg. Her discipline is metacomposition. She's able to understand spells and reshape them. It's the reason why she did so well even without attending Brakebills. Back on Fillory, Elliot is becoming a groomzilla preparing for his second wedding. And Quentin has been turning into a drunk, abusing the fact that 3 months on Fillory is only 3 days on Earth. But unlike Elliot, who is at least a fun drunk, Quentin is a depressing one. And Margot's like, you can't keep doing this around here. How about you go make yourself useful and go be Button Boy and gather stuff for Elliot from Earth? Katie is still trying to convince Penny that Reynard is her problem, but Penny's like, hey, evil gods are a universal thing. I'm gonna help out. They go to the library to look for information, but when they get there, Penny's application has gone through, and he's now expected to start working for the Order of the Library. And the first task he gets is to track down overdue books. Fenn's being distant, and when Elliot asks her how she feels about the whole new husband thing, she tells him it's her job to be understanding and she's focusing on taking care of her growing family. She doesn't mention the fact that she's also able to see the fairies. Quentin tracks down Josh on the orders of Elliot and goes to bring him to be the catering for the wedding, Before he can take him back, Josh offers him some of his edibles that allow you to see through realms, and Quentin says, F it. Sure, I'll do that. And during his out-of-body experience, he ends up seeing Julia's shade, saying, I'm not gone, I'm lost, come find me. Julia is getting concerned that she's not feeling worried about how her actions have been affecting the people around her. And when Quentin comes up to her and tells her that her shade isn't gone, she's like, okay, let's go get it back. They have no idea where to start, but Todd mentions offhandedly that Dean Fogg seems to know somebody who knows an awful lot about shades. But when they go to Dean Fogg, he's like, oh, the person that I knew a lot about shades is Alice from the 23rd time loop, who lost all of her friends and started researching shades in the afterlife. Penny tracks down the owner of the overdue book, Harriet, a woman who works at a place called Fuzzbeat, a company that makes clickbait articles in order to share the knowledge of the library in a more accessible way. Katie mentions to her that when they were in the library, they weren't able to find any books about killing gods. But Harriet tells her that there's no knowledge that the library lacks. Penny takes the book back to be processed, and the librarian that's doing it all of a sudden gets overcome with a hex and starts making his way towards a locked door before pulling a kill switch and taking himself out. The head librarian tells Penny that the reason the librarian did that is because there is knowledge that is too dangerous for the rest of the world in that room, the poison room. It's knowledge that could destroy the world. By the time they make it back to Fuzzbeat, Harriet's already gone. She left behind a note for Katie, saying, the book you're looking for is in the poison room, and it's called The Art of Killing Gods. Margot comes clean with Fen about what the real cost of the deal with the fairies was, and Fen goes to tell Elliot, but before she can, the fairies take her. While working in the kitchen, Josh discovers a plan by the Foo Fighters in order to infiltrate the castle during the wedding. In retaliation, Margot and Elliot have Josh go drop a potion off at the Foo Fighters' base in order to knock them out. In order to find out about shades from Alice 22, they will need to use a Tesla flexion, a magical device that allows two timelines to converge. And it takes both Julia and Dean Fogg working together in order for Quentin to get 2 minutes to speak with Alice 23. In a heartbreaking reunion, Alice 23 tells Quentin that when shades die, they go to the underworld. And the only way the living can go to the underworld is by finding a gatekeeper. But that's all she's been able to find out. After some researching, Julia finds out that a gatekeeper, an ancient one, is a dragon. Episode 11. The Rattening. Julia and Quentin track down the gatekeeper, but in order to get safe passage to the underworld, they have to give up the button to Fillory. Their bodies will stay earthside while their spirits go down to the underworld, where they will have 24 hours to find Julia's shade before the portal closes. They take an elevator down, and when they arrive in the underworld, they are directed to take a number. The infomercial for death starts playing, and they watch another person get dragged away for having their shade being missing. Julia decides it's not worth it mentioning anything. There's a lot of bureaucracy in death, so while they're waiting to be processed, Julia tracks down her karmic circle. Elliot is worried about Gay Wedding being perfect. Idri tells him that he doesn't need to be worrying so much, it's gonna be fine. Even if they have a simple ceremony, that'll be enough. And suggests to Elliot that why don't the two of them get to know each other a little bit better? Because while they can't technically touch each other until after the wedding, there's still a lot you can do. Idri puts a blindfold on Elliot and then turns into a rat? Penny is trying to fix his hand thing in the library when he gets assigned a supervisor. Him and Katie end up having mind sex since they're in different realms, and this is how they can communicate with each other. Katie is trying to figure out the poison room, but Penny doesn't have clearance. John's gone back to being a senator with Reynard working as the devil on his shoulder, acting as an advisor. He's trying to get John to start using his powers actively. Wouldn't it just be so much easier if you could just make people do what you want? When he tries to do that with a fellow senator, he accidentally uses too much juice and sends the senator into a medical episode. In the underworld, Julia and Quentin reunite with Richard and the merry band of believers, and Julia recruits their help on the Shade Hunt. Since Richard has been trying to find his son, he goes to the reception area and starts causing a distraction so that Julia and Quentin can go behind the desk and look up information on shades. They are able to find that shades are kept in Elysium, in a house that is just full of kids. And wouldn't you know it, the lady underground that they have been looking for all this time happens to be Persephone, who the shades say hasn't been around in a while. In Fillory, everything has gone to madness. Most of the castle has turned into rats. It's raining upside down, and all of the blondes in the land are gone, including the Palomino horses. Elliot gathers the remaining council members and trophies them all with the truth serum. Tick has been embezzling. Raph, the human translator for Abigail, the sloth council member, have been using the guards to run an escort service. And Margot finally reveals that Fen and Elliot's baby was the price to fix the wellspring. But ultimately, none of them are the cause for the chaos that's been happening in Fillory. After Margot's upsetting reveal, Elliot has her locked in the dungeons, albeit with her coconut oil. He's upset with her, but not enough to have her suffer. While in the dungeon, Margot gets told that Fen is in the fairy realm, and also the fact that the fairies also aren't the cause for the recent chaos in Fillory. John tries to tell his wife about his new non-human status, but she doesn't believe him, and then he accidentally mind controls her too. He confronts Reynard and says, "What you want me to do is messed up. I don't want any part in this." But Reynard defends himself. Sure, he can't argue that he's doing good, but what he's doing is like a healthy cult. It's not like their so-called benevolent lady underground who grinds up men and gods alike into the ground and then leaves them behind. Elliot figures out a way to bring back some order to Fillory, telling Josh that they need to hold an election and, reinvent democracy and bring it to Fillory. But just as he says that, he gets banished from Fillory and winds up back inside the physical kid's cottage. Penny finds out that the head librarian's name is Zelda, but when he goes to find her book, he realizes it's not in the main library, it's in the poison room. His supervisor, who also happens to be a kid who is seeking asylum in the library, tells him that she can help Penny get into the poison room. Katie is getting updated with what's going on in the library from Penny, but gets woken up by Todd, who tells her that John is here, and he wants to help them go after Reynard. Margot gets given a potion to the fairy realm so that she can go save Fen. Quentin finds out the reason why the spell to bring Alice back didn't work is because her shade is in the underworld. But since they can only bring back one shade when they go back out, they have to leave her behind. But Julia ends up sneaking out Alice's shade instead of her own. Episode 12, Ramifications. Julia and Quentin go to Mayakovsky's to try to figure out how to bring back Alice, but he tells them that it would take over 100 master magicians to fuel a spell like that. Or some magical batteries. After some convincing, they are able to use the batteries to reunite Nif and Alice with her shade, and once again, Alice is back in the flesh. But let's just say she's less than pleased to be human again. So Quentin gets put on a 48-hour freeze from her because his very presence is extremely upsetting. Elliot finds Quentin and asks for the button, but Quentin doesn't have the button anymore. Quentin did learn from the dragon that the first portal to Fillory is open, the grandfather clock that the Chatwins first used to go to Fillory. the very same one that is on the cover of the Fillory books, and the same clock that was at Quentin's Yale interview. In Fillory, Josh is the only remaining child of Earth, which means he's the next king. He decides not to do the crowning ceremony and just begins his reign with the slogan, Hakuna Matata. No worries if the mountains aren't here, just erase them from the maps. And if the beavers have problems, get them braces. This is the reign of 420 in Fillory. Julia goes to Katie to apologize for her unhinged actions and asks her to be her break as she still doesn't have her shade. Katie agrees and tells her what's been happening with John and the fact that Reynard seems to have an unhealthy obsession with the Lady Underground. Julia suggests that they lure Reynard out by pretending like Persephone has come back to Earth and then also training John up so he can use his powers against Reynard. Margot astral projects to Josh, telling him, "Hey dummy, I'm not banished, I'm just trapped in the fairy realm looking for Fen. You need to go get Wrath, Abigail's servant, to get a potion to help me get out of here." Penny and Sylvia, his child supervisor, find the fountain to the poison room. And this is where we find out Sylvia's motivations for wanting to go to the poison room. Apparently, every living person's book stops and then has 20 blank pages, something the librarians have been calling the Great Blank Spot. Something catastrophic happens in the next few weeks, and she wants to read her own book because, as a librarian, there might be some more information in her book. The librarians have a belief that when your book is written, your fate is sealed, but she witnessed Penny's book be reshelved 39 times, a la time loop, so there are exceptions. They both enter the poison room. Reynard knows about John going to see Katie and gives him a little present in retaliation. It's a box that contains the ear of John's wife. Reynard is gleeful about the effect that he has on others, even if it is his own son that he's hurting. Quentin and Elliot go to Vancouver to find the grandfather clock and are met with a superfan. Inside his house, he has a ton of Fillory paraphernalia. Quentin and the superfan talk about their shared love for Fillory when the fan brings up that he didn't enjoy the whole Jane becoming the Watcherwoman thing, saying Jane would never do that. It was never mentioned in the books that Jane was the Watcherwoman. The reason he knows this is because the superfan isn't just a fan, he's Umber. Martin didn't kill him, and made a deal with him to fake his death and run away and cut his losses with Fillory. And now he's focused on making a new pocket world, Cuba. Umber laughs at them for wanting to fix Fillory. It was never meant to be fixed. The children from Earth were meant to be like reality stars. Fillory was originally made from both order and chaos, but without him, only chaos remains. And if Amber is not entertained, he might do something crazy like, say, turn people into rats. Quentin tells Umber that he should stop hiding like a coward and come back to Fillory. But Umber only wants to move up and onwards. Fillory is on its last legs, and Ember is more likely to crush it like a petulant toddler than to fix it. Elliot appeals to him, saying, "If you won't fix this, can you at least let us try?" Umber agrees and gives them access to the grandfather clock. Persephone always shows up on Earth with a lightning storm and in a particular area of France. So all Julia and Katie have to do is create a light storm in France and hope that John's trained up enough to take out Reynard. But John decides that he can't go through with this plan and sends Julia away and makes Katie extract the god powers from inside of him, ending his suffering and allowing him to join his wife. Penny and Sylvia make it inside the poison room, and we find out it's called that because there's literal poison in the air. Penny finds the book for Katie, and Sylvia finds hers, only to discover that the Great Blank Spot isn't in her book. She's meant to die in the poison room. Penny barely makes it back to Katie, giving her the book before he collapses. and gets put inside a recovery ward at Brakebills. Being in the poison room irradiated him so much that his body has now developed Cancer Plus. Josh gets the potion for the fairy realm, but before he can use it, Prince S shows up demanding his dad. Before Josh can explain that King Idri has become a rat, the Lorians take action and start taking out the Felurian guards. This is not a time for Hakuna Matata. Josh ends up making a smoke bomb to knock out the Lorians, but unfortunately exposes himself too. But luckily, due to all of his time using substances, it doesn't knock him out, and rather, it just gives him the ability to see into the fairy realm. At this point, he takes the potion, joining Margot in the fairy realm. Julia and Katie have set up the trap for Reynard, putting John's essence inside of Bullet. All they have to do is have Katie run distraction with Reynard so that Julia can line up a shot. Reynard falls for the fake Persephone and shows up, but before Julia can take a shot, guess who shows up? If you guessed Persephone, you would be right, because apparently Reynard is her son. That's right. Reynard, the bad little trickster god, has mommy issues. Persephone asks Julia to have mercy and warns her that there are consequences for killing a god. Julia ends up having mercy, and Persephone takes Reynard away. In exchange, Persephone gives Julia back her shade. Now that the 48 hours are up, Quentin is allowed to see Alice again. Alice is still struggling with being incarnate again, and all of the knowledge that she learned as a Niffin is rapidly leaving her mind. On top of this, she is having to learn magic from the very beginning. But Quentin tells her, "You're Alice freaking Quinn. Anything you put your mind to, you can do." Elliot is working on making a plan to conquer Fillory, hypocritically sounding a lot like the Beast. Episode 13. We have brought you little cakes. Quentin is acting as Alice's psych ward nurse, giving her a potion that prevents her from harming herself. She once again asks Quentin why he had to do this, why he had to bring her back. And he tells her it's for the same reason that she wanted to bring Charlie back. He loves her. Penny is dealing with the consequences of having gone to the poison room. Without treatment that doesn't currently exist, he's not going to live more than 2 to 3 weeks. Katie is upset with how the Reynard thing went down. It wasn't a very satisfying ending. But with his new lease on life, Penny tells her that she shouldn't waste her time being mad about it. Julia is once again dealing with all of her emotions now that she has her shade back, and she is becoming one with her couch. Elliot goes to ask her if she still has that amulet that she got from the Lorien illusionist that allows one to be hidden, even from gods. He convinces her to join the fight for a free Fillory, telling her that with her emotions back, she shouldn't really be alone right now. Katie is back on her hater train and doesn't want to see Julia. Penny tells Elliot about the Great Blank Spot, telling him that in his book, Elliot went back to Fillory, trying to find a spell that could force Ember to take his little grubby hands off of Fillory before everything goes blank. So Elliot really needs to do anything but that. They can save Fillory if they subscribe to a free will universe. Katie wants to spend the rest of Penny's time with him relaxing in Tahiti, but Penny, ever the hero, still wants to save the world. Instead of taking them to Tahiti, he takes them to the library, where he gets put on probation due to the fact that he went into the poison room without authorization, and Katie ends up getting sent back to Earth. Margot and Josh find Fen chained in the fairy realm. The two realms overlap, so technically they're in the same place, just in different dimensions. But Fen isn't willing to leave without her baby, a girl. Margot has an audience with the Fairy Queen who tells her that she's not willing to renegotiate the baby, and also warns them that it's dangerous for them to be continuously displeasing Ember. They need to stop demanding things from him and instead offer to him. she gives them a plant that will be irresistible to Ember once it's baked in a cake. Elliot gets Quentin on the Save Fillory plan, telling him, screwing up is inevitable. There are some things that you just can't fix, but right now, Fillory needs you. So Quentin goes to Umber, and Elliot goes back to Fillory to unratify King Idri and de-escalate the situation with Loria. Now a human again, Idri and Elliot reconfirm their alliance by testing if Elliot's banishment means that the Fillorian marriage rules no longer apply to him. They don't. In order to get back to Fillory, Margot and Josh have to pay a toll to the fairies, which ends up being one of Margot's eyes. Elliot tells Margot about the upcoming Blink disaster and tells her they have to do what they do best. Act out with a total lack of empathy and impulse control? No. Party like the world depends on it. Because it does. Fillory Rager time! Quentin goes to appeal to Umber to come back to Fillory, but he tells Quentin that his talents would be better served trying to create something new instead of trying to fix the unfixable Fillory, and takes him inside Cuba. Cuba is a sad, bland, linear world. And upon Quentin's comment that it lacks chaos, the only chaos that Umber is able to bring himself to do is to drop a little bit of spaghetti onto the table. The Fillorians don't know how to throw a rager, but luckily, Josh knows how to bake a cake. Ember shows up due to the cakes and sees Elliot and goes, "Oh, I thought I banished you." Isn't that an interesting plot twist? I do like that. Elliot tries to pitch to him Fillory's newest chapter, but makes the mistake of bringing up Umber, which dampens the mood, and Ember goes, "Well, it was fun while it lasted. It's gotten boring now. Might as well destroy it." And he starts dismantling the world. While Quentin and Umber have been in Cuba, Julia has been transporting both of them into Fillory. In Fillory, she breaks open Cuba, and Quentin, and more importantly, Umber, appear. The brothers are reunited where Ember realizes that Umber betrayed him by faking his own death. He takes his anger out on Umber by killing him. After taking out his brother, he doesn't seem to be stopping, so Julia goes to distract him while Quentin grabs the magic sword and deals him an ending blow. Fillory is godless. Elliot and Margot bring constitutions to Fillory so that the new land of the free from the gods can make their own. Katie finds Harriet at a hot dog stand and tells her what happened with Penny. And Harriet is hesitant to help at first, but when Katie offers to use Penny as an unwilling double agent, Harriet agrees. Quentin goes back to Alice and tries to use Bacon to try to convince her about the good parts about being human. And if you thought Bacon would lead to horny time again, you would be right. Of course you are right. This is the Magicians. It's always horny time. During their pillow talk, Quentin brings up the fact that he killed Ember, and Alice freaks out. When she was a Niffin, she saw how the universe works, the entire magical plumbing of it all. Gods like Ember have parents, the old gods. And while to Ember, humans are like toys, to the old gods, they are nothing more than cells. And when those cells turn malignant, they amputate. There is an actual magical plumber of the gods that when the lesser beings are naughty, turns off magic. So now, magic's gone. Brakebills, on top of no longer having wards to keep it private and now having to rely on the old-fashioned chain link fence and no trespassing signs, can't teach magic anymore. They can only teach the theoretics of it in the hopes that one day it comes back. Friar Joseph comes to Alice telling her that he's dying. All of the creatures that relied on the wellspring to stay alive are dying. And he warns her that without her magic, all of the enemies she made while she was a Niffin are going to come find her. Without magic, Fillory sucks. It's like being plunged into the Dark Ages. And Elliot and Margot are having a difference in opinions of how Fillory should be ruled. Elliot still wants Fillory to become a democracy, but Margot says, without magic, these people need to be ruled. Fen comes back from the fairy realm by sacrificing a few of her toes in order to give the warning that the fairies are coming. Julia comes to visit Quentin at Brakebills, saying she has something really important to show him. She's actually able to still do a little bit of magic, sort of like how she did at the very beginning of the series. It's not a lot, but it means that magic isn't fully gone. If you made it to this part of the video, I just want to sincerely thank you for watching. I remember watching The Magicians when it first came out, and none of my friends were watching it, so it's really great that I can share this with you all online. So thank you. And if you want, you should like, comment, and subscribe, and maybe I'll do season 3. Bye!